And you can find this on my website, powerthroughunity.org, and the 42 admonitions of Maya. All right? So now, let's just look at ourselves. This is something I look through the news feed on my app. There's a lot of stuff going on. But first of all, let me set the tone, for this presentation here. And it's every morning, man, I got to start writing them down. I get good messages every morning, good messages. I need to, write them down, but I already have stacks and stacks of papers and stuff that I refine. I also have a bunch of material that I haven't edited. I try to watch what's coming out of my mouth so I don't have to go back and just keep it real. But let's look at ourselves for a moment. Let's look at ourselves. We're not the only people in the world. And matter of fact, people of color, these are our offspring. You got the Indian tribes and stuff like that. The Hispanics. We got the Aborigine in Australia. We got they consider themselves colored too, right? They got nice wavier hair and dark skin, but they're considered blacks, right? So, which freaked me out, and they have gone through the same struggle that we have gone through here. So we need to wake up. We need us, and the world needs us. They are being, the murder rate's high, the suicide rate's high. They murdering the kids, they kidnapping the kids. It's totally unbelievable that we remain in such a state of dysfunction. When I want to show you that in America, our land, we have it much better. We have no reason. We need to gird ourselves and get it together. Especially the men. I have to talk to the men because, I know we have different thought processes and so forth, but we need to be able to come together and work together and build and restore our families and our homes, understanding what happened. We don't have to go all the way back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Allensworth and all those type of things. There were thousands of other settlements, because there was millions of people out there that left out of slavery, with nowhere to go but to build. So we only hear a couple of them. And for us to be in the condition today, they just, by standard policy, just kept wiping them communities out. Just wiping them out. And the murders and atrocities, we only know a fraction of it. See? So it's up to us to rectify this situation. But we have to be knowledgeable. We need to be critical thinkers. Right? So, too many of us have been misdirected and distracted through the excessive lust of this world and false teachers in search of materialism at the expense of others. I talked last week about these gangbangers. Maybe I didn't get to it in my series of discussions where they were gangbangers sitting on a car. There was about 5 of them. They were being interviewed. They said, "Listen, man, in this group, he's about the violence and stuff. It was the backside of Houston. This same story all across our cities, where my mind just keep going. I just gotta, it's and he said, "Hey, man, if I see my brother here doing good and feeding his family, and I can't feed my family, then I'm gonna have to take him out so I can get what he got." With the drug abuse and people selling drugs to destroying one family so they can feed their family. That's the rat in the cage syndrome. The rat in the cage syndrome. Like I talked about that last week. You have a cage, got your rats in there, they're getting fed. Wonderful parents, nurturing parents with their siblings. But take away the food, they don't eat the kids. And then when they ate the kids, they're going to start fighting each other and start eating each other. That's what happens when you confine a people and take away the resources. And that's what's happening throughout our cities. But those of us who are thinking clearly, this is a great economic opportunity to help ourselves and to help others, right? Because America is capitalism. It's all about capitalism, profit motive. And all this nonprofit stuff, 501c3 stuff, and especially with the churches, and it's a trick. It's a welfare mentality trick. So you take away personal responsibility, and somebody gonna bless you. And for you to think like that, you know, and the only reason that you think that way, because most of you in that situation, a little clique and so forth, you got jobs and stuff, you know, it's a lot of poor that goes there, but they making it, you know, hand over fist. They're making it. So they don't feel the pain and agony of those who don't have it. So now you can, because you haven't been taught to do for self, that somebody's going to save you from the air. It has a debilitating effect on your mental process. And then they get to the point where, like, okay, all this welfare and all this we taking it away. But the mind don't kick in and say, I need to do for self, right? It's like you complain about the benefits that's been taken away from you. And it's not saying that welfare and benefits aren't appropriate when necessary, but needed. But don't make a way of life of it. Because just like a child, if you never teach him to wipe his behind, he'll never get it right. You tell him to go in there and wash dishes, but you never took the time to show him how to wash dishes properly. There's always going to be food on the plate. Right? Too many of us have been misdirected and distracted through the excessive lust of this world and false teachers in search of materialism at the expense of others. So our capacity to think critically has been totally destroyed. But God gave us a mind. He gave us a computer. And how many of you now used to remember everybody in your family's telephone number by memory? But now these phones, man, you lose a phone, it's done. It's done. And those of spiritual, when I talk about Jesus, it does not do anyone any good. Say, well, I know he lived, right? I know he raised people from the dead. He did all those type of things, right? That does you no good unless you absorb his spiritual virtues and his ethics and his behavior. So when you call on the name of Jesus, Yeshua, that means that you're dwelling in his magnificence. The kingdom of heaven is within. Other than that, you're using his name and his essence in vain. And it doesn't matter what religion you believe in. If you don't have those attributes in your heart and your spirit, the way you conduct yourself and others, then it's in vain. And when you go to the website, if you log in, there will be a lesson on Maya. And the first lesson will teach you why it is so important for you to dwell in the spirit of Maya, a way of life. Because at the end of times, the end of your days, your heart must be as light as a feather and will be judged accordingly. So that's real direction versus religious, pompous and doctrines that don't take you anywhere. That's what stripped everything apart. You worship man and not God. You worship a church that brought that whole destructive concept into being that did not understand that you took spirituality and turned it into a religion. A religion man-made, spirituality God-made, right? What he put into your heart. And some people, when they stopped being spiritual through force and violence and gave up their spiritual nature to become religious. Judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, right? So, when Yeshua the Christ and his family fled to Egypt when he was a child because King Herod was seeking to kill him, right? After he was discovered by wise men from the east, and instead of going back to King Herod, the wise men left for their own lands. Because they're supposed to seek him out, find him, then report back to King Herod, but they was like God put on them and said, listen, man, I'm going home. I'm going back to my own country. I ain't tripping with you, King Herod. Which terribly upset King Herod. So when Yeshua came out of Egypt and went into the synagogue at the age of 12 after he had died, right? At the age of 12, his wisdom and knowledge, remember he was in Egypt. Everybody badmouthed Egypt and stuff like that, but you only get half the story, and you look at the Bible, you understand that they had a relationship, ongoing relationship with Israel, and Judah. So you just can't listen to what people tell you. You got to do your research. You got to read for yourself. Study to show thyself approved. Right? Synagogue, he went to the synagogue at the age of 12. His wisdom and knowledge of the scriptures astounded the people, rabbis and the scribes. And this is where the scriptures came from. Right? This is where the scriptures came from. And when we go through the religious history, we'll see how these scriptures were taken over during this period of time, and the priests, the Egyptian priests, were forced to turn over their sacred writings, which were the scriptures. That's how they got their hands on it, and then plagiarized and did their thing, right? But this is wisdom knowledge that was passed down from generation to generation for thousands and thousands of years. And it was a word from God because God taught them how to write, right? How to write, how to put their thoughts on paper. So it was the word of God because he blessed them with the ability now to write. Right? So his wisdom, they wondered where he received such knowledge being of such a tender age. Train up a child, man. Teach them when they're young. That's what this program is about. This is a dog-eat-dog world that we live in. And you have to be prepared. And a lot of our children, I believe, young men and women, end up incarcerated because they're not prepared to live life on life terms. So they take an easy way out. They become victimized because they want the easy way. They want the easy way. And they pass on generational curses because then their parents didn't learn how to conduct life in a different way. And it becomes a necessity when the community, the cohesiveness of the community is not in play. And one of the things that I was bringing up about the prisoners letting those people out, 2 million people just let them out, is that now you have dysfunctional individuals in society among functional individuals. Right? And during slavery times, it was about maybe 800,000, lasted up to 2 million people were enslaved, but free blacks were like 5 million or more. Right? So everybody was not a slave. And this narrative where they show blacks, and that's not true. That is completely not true. You know what I'm saying? Just trying to keep your mind done. That's completely not true, right? Because a lot of the freed blacks fought to free the slaves, the ones of their brothers that were enslaved. So now you got these two groups mixing together. They come into the city. A lot of them stay in the South. You go there now, talk to them. They still, got that, that mentality. Especially with believing somebody gonna save them, and they not doing nothing for themselves really. You got a group of people doing it, but they're more, you turn into these, people who look out for their own personal interests instead of that of the community. But things are gradually getting better. But that's why we have this opportunity to talk to you right now to hopefully wake you up and smack you in the face. Wake up, wake up. So you have these two groups now. You got the ones that have been refined, if you will, refined Negroes, the ones that were first of all, they were already here, the descendants of those who were already on this land. And then you have ones that were living in that area that have been enslaved because they were free states and enslaved states. So if you lived in that area, most likely you're going to be enslaved. Then you have some Africans that were brought over, but not in the numbers that they were saying that were brought over. And a lot of them were moved from that area, shipped to other areas in the United States, and then told them that they came from Africa. So most of this stuff is deceptive, false teachers, from history to the church house, right? So listed below, we're going to go through some of the ancient Egyptian spiritual teachings that Yeshua, the Christ, was taught and trained, raised up a child. And the thing is that we kids come home with reading reports and, oh, that's too much work for them. Then they grow up to be no good because you never taught them anything. You never made them do any chores, use any discipline or structure on the child. If you don't discipline a child and structure them, they'll strike you down. You know what I'm saying? You gotta That's why they took the men out of the household. Then the family structure fell